Today my guest is Mike Wood. Mike, how are you, sir?
Pretty good, Dave.
Let's talk about the cloud.
What about the cloud?
Well, I'm thinking about moving to the cloud.
Are you? Let me guess. You've had somebody come and ask you if you're ready for the cloud.
My boss, he says, Dave, I was reading this magazine article on the flight over here. He manages by, I'm actually making up the story. My boss is a nice guy. But I have had bosses that manage based on what they read in that in-flight magazine.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the cloud a lot.
Well, cloud is a huge buzzword right now.
That's my point.
It's the buzzword, and people are interested in it. And you get a lot of questions about, can we go to the cloud? Does the cloud make sense to us? And I did talk today at CodeStock about this, and my second slide was a joke about people's business plan for going to the cloud. So you have phase one, decide to go to the cloud.
Decided, okay.
Yep, decide to go to the cloud. Phase two.
What is phase two?
Phase three, profits.
what was that middle part?
So that's the problem. On my slide was a big question mark.
Okay.
And it's a joke from a South Park episode.
Okay.
But sadly, that's a lot of the business plan, because people are not sure how to decide to go to the cloud or not go to the cloud, or what it's going to take.
Okay.
And sometimes they may rush into it and just say, well, let's just go do it, because it's the cool thing to do, right? We have to go to the cloud.
Yeah, that's not a good enough reason. We saw this before when the popularity of the World Wide Web kind of exploded.
Oh, yeah, the flaming websites.
8 years ago, 10 years ago, everybody wanted to move all their applications to the web.
Yeah.
Just because. They didn't stop thinking, why should I? Is it appropriate for this application to be on the web?
And there's some that got moved to the web that should not be.
Right, yeah. If it's a rich client application, then it's better as a desktop app. So people didn't stop to ask those questions. What are the questions they should be asking themselves before moving to the cloud?
Well, they need to look at their application portfolio, if they have one.
Huh?
If they don't have an application portfolio, you've got to go down a list of all your applications that you support. Mm-hmm. And you've got to have information like, well, what technologies does it use? What dependencies does it have, meaning third party or on other applications that you have. So if you have applications that depend on each other, maybe services that depend on each other. And you have to ask the question of, are those dependencies and this application something that can live in the cloud or even belongs there for each application?
Well, that's interesting, but you don't have to move every part of your application to the cloud.
No. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of use in looking at a hybrid solution, right?
Okay.
Especially because when you go to move to the cloud, let's say you make the decision, yes, this is a good move for us.
Uh-huh.
Then you're going to say, well, how are we going to get there? Is it we're just going to come in and tell the developers move us up to the cloud? Or are we going to come in and say, well, the very next version will be cloud-based. So scrap everything we have and go to the cloud. And there's better ways to do it than that, right? Let's leverage all the stuff that we have before. A lot of the cloud offerings allow you to leverage that code that you have already.
Okay.
And then if you used good decisions about how to make sure that your application or your solution was flexible, right? You could use good, solid development practices, right?
Single responsibility.
Single responsibility is a big one in it, right? So you don't have everything in one big exit, right?
Okay.
If you can take that and break it up, you can move pieces up to the cloud. So if you have a service already, then you can say, well, as we're working on these other pieces, maybe that belongs in the service or up in the cloud if people are hitting it from outside our little world, right?
Sure.
If you have an application that all 100 people that use it are in the same building with the server today, this doesn't give you a real good reason to go to the cloud, because all you'll be doing is introducing latency between an app that they're currently working on that's in their building is now being posted somewhere else.
Oh, there could be other reasons why.
There could be very good if you're
dialing up or dialing down.
Dialing up, if you need to use the elasticity, right? That's a very good reason to move.
Yeah.
But to move it up there,
But you need to ask those questions. You can't just blindly assume that's the right thing.
Exactly.
So we started out talking about I need to decide what about my application will determine whether or not it needs to move to the cloud, and now we sort of moved into asking the question, what about the pieces of my application?
Yes.
Will determine whether it's a right fit for the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So what are those? We said exposure to the outside world as well. You want to make it available to someone besides your internal organization.
Yes.
This is something that leans towards putting it out online or on the cloud.
Or even it's a solution that you're currently hosting internally or at a
Yep.
third-party host that is already on the internet, exposed to everyone.
Okay, and then elasticity is another one.
Very big one. Yep.
What else?
There's. Let me think here.
Let's just frame the questions. I mean, we don't have to know the answers. Just what questions should we be asking ourselves?
Well, for instance, who is your audience? Where are they at? We've hit that. Is latency a big deal if you're
Latency.
moving something out into the cloud that they're used to having local?
Can it tolerate that?
Yeah, exactly. There was an example I spoke with a gentleman that they ended up going with a hosted solution, a shrink wrap kind of package, that dealt with CAD software, and it was hosted in the cloud. And these CAD files are huge,
Right.
And so getting them out and putting them back and getting them out, it was not a good experience for the users, right? Other questions that you have to ask about whether or not it's going to be good for you to move is, what pain points do you currently have in your system that might be fixed by going to the cloud?
What about, does it matter whether or not I decided to go with Amazon versus Microsoft, Azure versus Google? Are the questions different, or are they the same issues between them?
Well, no, they could be different because their offerings are slightly different. Okay, so Amazon is a great example with their EC2, so Elastic Computing Service, is a great example of an infrastructure as a service cloud offering.
Okay.
And what that means is I get a VM, a virtual machine, up in the sky, and I can scale them up and ask for more of them, right? But in general, I'm responsible for the licensing on that box. I can terminal service into that box and make sure all the patching is up to date. I'm pretty much responsible for it, and it's not much different than the machines that I have in my current data center.
It just happens to be located somewhere.
It's somewhere else, and I can just turn them off when I don't need them, right? And I'm no longer paying on them.
Oh, okay.
So then that's the major benefit there.
Okay. That's that elasticity.
Elasticity, yep. And you can spin them up, and there's that infinite resource idea with the Astronet, right? Because it's not truly infinite; it's just mere mortals are never going to hit.
Yeah. So it's hard to go out and buy 100
Yes.
servers tomorrow.
Well, not only that, but the speed in which a lot of businesses, especially larger corporations, can actually procure a server,
Right.
get it hooked up and up in a rack.
That could take weeks.
It could, and almost any of the good cloud providers, it's more like less than an hour or even less than 30 minutes.
Right.
And then Microsoft Azure is more of a platform as a service offer. So,
Find that.
well, instead of, you still get a virtual machine in the sky, but in this particular case, I won't terminal service into it. It's a location that I place my code, and I code against the API for the platform, and I might use some of the additional services the platform offers. But it's just a place to put my code. I don't care about licensing because that's on their own.
Oh.
This is just a thing to put my code.
And you don't care about a lot of the infrastructure, like
No, none of the infrastructure.
replicating your SQL Server database or clustering it or things like
Right.
that.
Yeah. SQL Azure, they replicate your SQL Azure database 3 times for you,
Right.
and that's included in the price.
I see. Okay. So should I move to the cloud?
Depends.
Depends. It always depends.
It does. It all depends.
All right. So this gives me an idea of the kind of things that I need to ask: elasticity, exposure, latency factors, even whether or not I want to. How much do I want to control? Do I want my own virtual
Yes.
machine?
Yep.
What do you call it? Infrastructure as a service,
Infrastructure as a service now.
or platform as a service, which is what Microsoft is providing, basically.
Right.
Less control of the platform itself, of the underlying systems, the hardware, and the infrastructure, but more control over the API, more flexibility.
More flexibility, and it's really just, I can host my code there and not have to worry about the rest of it.
Yeah, less control, but less headaches.
Exactly. And there's other things to think about, or at least gather before you make the decision, because we've talked all about reasons to go, and cost is a big one, elasticity is a big one, but you can't guarantee that it will be cheaper until you research what you currently have.
Right.
And a lot of companies, and people, if you ask them, do you know how much it costs to run your XYC solution?
Yeah, there's a lot of hidden costs around.
Yeah, and they'll go, well, I don't know, there's a couple of servers. It's like, well, there's a couple of
There's
servers.
some people that are maintaining those
People that make
servers.
heat, or not, Brian Prince tells me, we don't heat data centers. But cooling the data centers, staff for them, all the hardware between the machines.
Sure, that part of the
Yeah.
building costs money.
Exactly. And so all of that rolls up to a cost for your solution,
Uh-huh.
and it may be more than you think it is.
Interesting. And then what are the cost factors that go into the cloud typically? I mean, this was almost vendor neutral, right? Because they've all sort of copied each other's pricing.
They're very, very close to each other.
But we're talking about compared to the amount of data or code that you're storing.
Most of them are the number of machines or instances that you're running, right? So you get a charge for one machine or two machines. In Azure, it's 12 cents per VM size unit. And size unit is a small is a 1 CPU, around 1 gigabyte. A medium is 2 CPUs, on and on.
Okay.
And that's 12 cents an hour for them. And then if you want to use some of their storage capabilities, so they have a blob storage similar to Amazon's S3, right? Then you usually get charged for a total amount of gigabyte for the month, and then your bandwidth in and out.
Okay.
And almost all the cloud offerings
So you need to do
charge
that-
you by bandwidth.
You need to do that math as well.
Yes,
Which
you
isn't really hard as
definitely-
long as you
yeah.
know about what your bandwidth is, about what your storage needs are.
And you should be able to go to your IT group now and say, how much bandwidth does this solution take in a month? And how much space is it taking up? And if it uses a lot of files, where are those files stored? Right.
All right. Anything else?
No, the big thing that I would say is just don't buy into it's automatically going to be cheaper, it's automatically going to be better. Do the research and maybe a small proof of concept and check it out. And don't choose, for God's sakes, don't choose the biggest, most important project of your company for the year and decide we're going to go to the cloud with this.
Something lower risk is
Yes,
mitigated.
never try a brand new methodology or technology if you can get away with it. Sometimes you have to try a new technology to meet a need, but try it with something small so you can learn from it. There's a great saying that experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, right? And so learn from it and then apply it to the larger things if you can.
Okay. Before we go, where can people find out more about Mike Wood?
More about me, they can go to my blog, which is mvwood.com, or they can follow me on Twitter at Mike Woo, and that's MIKEWO.
And they can go to n+1.org.
Yes, n+1.org, and that is an online resource for architects and people that are interested in good development practices. So even if you don't consider yourself an architect, this is really for people that are wanting to improve their coding and improve their knowledge of technology and make friends while they're doing it.
Well said. Mike, thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Dave. This is really for people that are wanting to improve their coding and improve their knowledge of technology and make friends while they're doing it.
Well said.